Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Springfield at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library, where we have an unprecedented opportunity. We have an opportunity to see behind and what's inside this new book called Treasures of the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. These treasures were researched by the staff here at the library. They've been back through the stacks for, we'll find out how long it took them to do it, but to find out some of the most interesting items in the historical collection and bring them to the public's attention. And Glenna Schroeder-Lynn was the one that edited all this material. And Glenna, you and the staff here had a lot of material to go through, because we're talking hundreds of years of stuff that's been stored and God knows where and how, what kind of condition for all those decades and decades, huh?
Yeah, the library has been around for 125 years, and this is a celebration of the library's 125 years.
Wow, and you're going to describe to us what the process was like, and you're going to show us some of the treasures that you found.
Yes.
And folks can get the book.
That's correct.
But we can't show it all, of course, but we can show a good number of the most interesting things that you found most interesting anyway.
Right, right. It's an opportunity that we wanted for people who, both those who can come here and have wondered what else do we have, mm-hmm. and those who can't come and would like to know. Yeah. So that's an opportunity to share that kind of stuff, and the staff had a good time picking out things, their favorites, mm-hmm. a lot, because we have things that are really gorgeous, we have things that are really strange, yeah. and we have a lot of stuff that's purely useful. We have something in the neighborhood of 13 million items in the library, and so clearly we chose basically 85 for our treasures, and then we've got about about that many also supporting things that we have, but all of it is stuff yeah. from the library.
I asked you to get some of the more interesting things, or the things mm-hmm. that you found, mm-hmm. the treasures among treasures, out for right. us. And we want to start with this one, because this is really is one of a kind. This was handmade. This gorgeous edition was handmade for Governor Horner, right?
Well, actually, it wasn't made originally for Governor Horner, although Governor Horner is the one who ended up with it. This is a specially bound version, and you can see how elaborate it is, front and back, bound in leather. And with leather inside the front goodness. Cover, silk end papers here. And what it is, it's Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, as well as his second inaugural, mm-hmm. and Walt Whitman's poem, "O Captain, My Captain." Mm-hmm. And it's an illuminated manuscript made by a man named Alberto Sangorsky. Mm-hmm. It was done about 1929 and then bound by Revere and Sons, who are one of the most famous special bindings people.
The gold leaf and everything is hand-drawn and hand-painted.
Exactly.
Goodness.
Exactly. And you think of illuminated manuscripts being Bibles. Mm-hmm. But Sangorsky actually did some others. He did some Robert Louis Stevenson. He also did the Sermon on the Mount. But each of these is...
Each page is so precious. And you can see, is that silk? That's a silk separator there? The pages?
It's tissue.
Tissue?
It's tissue.
Oh, my goodness.
But choosing which page or pages to feature in the Treasures book was very difficult. Yeah. And we ended up with the "O Captain, My Captain." Mm-hmm. But it's just really, really gorgeous.
407 years ago, and there's the address.
The dropped capital mm-hmm. and all.
Oh, that's lovely.
It was just...
It was a pretty easy choice, wasn't it, to choose this one?
Yeah, and it's so funny because each department chose their own things. Mm-hmm. And when I saw the list of what the Lincoln department had chosen, and they had this Sangorsky Gettysburg Address, and I thought, well, they're using the original Gettysburg Address, and so why would they do this? And then I saw it, and I was going, oh, wow, now I know why they would do that.
Okay, let's stop on the Walt Whitman picture there for one. Captain, my captain. Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is the one that's
and
in
that's
the book.
his poem about Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
Oh, that's just beautiful. You must have really spent some time just appreciating that for what it was.
Yeah, well, because this thing lives in the vault, it's not like we get to see it often. So
right.
I've seen it a couple of times, but it's always nice to see it again.
You mentioned lives in the vault. One thing
Right.
I would like for you to do for us today is take us into the stacks.
Right.
And show us how things are preserved and how they're categorized and then how you find what you're looking for. Because you're going to show us something that is really precious from the Civil War.
Right.
So can we make that our next stop?
Sure.
Okay, let's do that. Glenn, I always think of the stacks as being a dark, dusty basement, you know, like where you're going to creep down into. Here, it's temperature controlled. It's quite cold in here. It's quite bright, and it's all automated. And this is, when we look at this room, this is a very small percentage of the storage that you have for all these items, isn't it?
That's correct. These are the collections that manuscripts uses most that are in this room. And then audiovisual has a small stacks, newspaper microfilm has a small stacks, but the whole basement is also stacks. It's half books, half our larger collections, because some of our congressional collections have 500 boxes, cubic foot boxes.
Now, you know which row, which aisle we want to go to, right?
I do.
So what are we aiming for? You got to move these around, and this is how you do it. It's all automated.
Right. And I will also say that although it's brightly lit when we're in here, the lights do go off of their own accord when we're not in here. So that is.
So you've made room in aisle M15. That's our destination?
Correct. That's correct. And we're going to get a Civil War diary that's in the Taylor family collection.
Okay.
James Taylor was in the 96th Illinois Infantry, as was his younger brother and his two cousins. So,
Okay, and this is the diary.
This is the diary.
Okay, and what we're going to learn a little about what it was like in the field for a soldier that was helping doctors during doing their medical work, right?
Well, actually, not so much with him. We've got a letter about that, although he did do some, and he ended up being a nurse while he was sick, actually, because that was very common in the Civil War. Once you were starting to get better, then they had you nursing those who were sicker than you were. And in his case, he ended up then getting sicker again.
Oh, man. Okay.
So
we're going to go take a look at his diary now.
Right.
Okay. Let's go where it's a little warmer.
Yes, please. It's 65 in here.
Okay, Glenna, this is our find from the stacks.
Right.
And what it is, and you'll show us, it's a diary of a Civil War soldier, and apparently it was quite common for these men in the field to keep day-to-day diaries, wasn't it?
That's true. We have quite a bunch of them in our collection, and they go from the very mundane to the very quite explicit, actually. This Leslie C. Taylor was the son of James Taylor, whose diary this is. And usually they have a leather cover. This one fell off before it was given to us by James Taylor's great-grandson, actually. And we can see James Taylor was a native of Scotland. He moved to the United States with his older sister and his younger brother when he was 13. And they moved to Lake County. And he enlisted in the 96th Illinois Infantry. He and his younger brother, and also two of his cousins, all served in that regiment. And so he was with Sherman's troops in Georgia in 1864 here. And he was wounded the next day on May 9th at Rocky Face Ridge. And he was wounded somewhere in the right arm. We're not sure exactly where. But you can see that as we turn to the next page, he's writing probably with his right hand, but it's certainly injured.
Yeah. His right hand is wounded, and of course you can see his penmanship is not nearly what it was before.
Yeah, you can just see the he obviously wrote something in the morning and then was wounded in the evening. And he describes that and what happened, and then he ended up in the hospital in Nashville. And he ended up, and one of the things about his diaries, and one exists for 1863 and a little bit in 1865, but he often heads it HG for health good. And if I read this to you about what's going on, you wonder, now why is he saying
He doesn't want anybody to worry
good.
at the same time he's losing his arm.
No, but he's writing this himself for himself. He writes letters to his sisters and tells them about his health. But he says, HG, but quite weak from suffering so much pain. Did not bleed any during the night, but it commenced when Dr. Sample was talking with me. He fastened the tourniquet, took off the dressing, washed off my arm, and sent for the surgeon in charge. After a good deal of examination, he allowed there was some hemorrhage, and after a while, they carried me downstairs and amputated my arm. I suffered no pain and lost no blood.
No pain, I doubt that very much.
And
My
so the next day he's saying, H good, or HG, health good, but quite weak from the pain. So, it's like, okay, well, maybe he didn't have any pain while they were taking it off.
And he's writing now with his left hand, and the rest of the diary shows that he had to learn to write left-handed, and he was quite good at it, considering he'd never had to do it before. Oh, that's just a heartbreaker. Taylor may have been part of the Taylorville founding family.
Well, no, actually he wasn't. He moved to Taylorville, but it has nothing to do with his family particularly. He became a lawyer, very successful lawyer, did a lot of drainage law and other things, and he was he was fairly notable in town. He lived into 1921. Unfortunately, what happened was that about a year before he died, he got cancer in his left wrist, and he had to have his left arm amputated.
Oh my God.
And so he had to have someone with him all the time to help him. And then the cancer spread to his lungs, and that was what he died of in 1921. But his great-grandson gave us his diaries, his Civil War letters, plus a bunch of other family papers that are really quite interesting. And so we're really excited for this representation of, and this representative collection of, we have a number of family collections, and those are really helpful for us when they do multiple generations. So.
Thank you. Ron Rietveld, when you were just a kid, 14 years old, you were very curious about history.
I loved it.
And you were poking around Illinois, looking through some old documents, right?
Yes.
Turns out, although those many years ago, you found something in the Illinois collection that nobody knew existed.
That's right.
What was it?
It was a photograph of President Abraham Lincoln at the funeral in New York City, in City Hall, April 24, 1865.
And nobody knew where this photograph was? I guess they knew a photograph existed, but nobody had seen
No,
it?
they didn't even know the photograph existed.
Is that right?
Yes. You see, it was taken on that day of the funeral, but illegally, so to speak. Mrs. Lincoln had ordered that there be no photographs taken of her husband's remains on the funeral train trip back to Springfield. And that was a 1,700+ mile trip.
Yeah, a lot of people had access, and nobody was taking pictures.
They were not supposed to.
Except there was one. Right?
There was one. And how it happened was General Townsend, Edward Townsend, was in charge of the funeral train schedule all the way to Springfield for Washington, D.C. He gave permission for Jeremiah Gurney's son to take a photograph of that scene at City Hall, but from a distance, 20 feet up. So they wouldn't focus on the features of the president in the coffin, but the whole scene. And that ends up to be what's in this picture.
Okay. Well, the suspense is killing us. So show us what you found when you were 14.
Okay. Well, when I went into the envelope, X14, I found this. This is an envelope mailed from Minnesota to Washington, D.C. to John G. Nicolay, who was Lincoln's private secretary during the Civil War years. And I opened it up, of course, and in there I found a letter.
Okay.
And this is the letter.
This is to Nicolay.
And it's to John Nicolay, and it's from Lewis H. Stanton the son of Secretary of War Stanton.
Okay.
But his father had died in 1869. But he had found in his father's papers an item he is sending to John Nicolay, and it reads, he says, in going over my father's papers, I came across this enclosed, he says, photo with possibly, how do we see that? It is of no use and to you and Colonel Hay, though I think it probable no use. Then he talks about say hello to Helen Nicolay, his daughter, and he had read an item by McClellan in a magazine and asked what he thought of it, because McClellan, of course, was no love among the Lincoln people.
Right.
And so I put this back in the envelope. And then there was another piece of paper, same size, in which I opened up and found this.
Oh my goodness.
This is the photo to which he's referring, which was taken by Gurney and not supposed to have been taken. Mrs. Lincoln said no. So the plate, the large plate in print was destroyed, and then there's a small plate, a stereopticon camera, multi-lens. This is one of 4 on the plate, and Stanton ordered it destroyed. He pled with Henry Ward Beecher at the Brooklyn Congregational Church and Raymond of the New York Times, the editor, to save it. And so they said, please don't destroy it. So Stanton said, okay, give me a print and I'll give it to Robert Lincoln to see if it's permissible to keep it, Lincoln's son. And this is the print that was given to Robert. But Robert said, no, my father should not have any pictures that could be sold in death. And Gurney wanted to sell them to the general public. And Townsend thought it would be a wonderful thing for people to have a copy who couldn't see the remains in New York City Hall. And here are the remains, the face you can see in the coffin. And at either end of the coffin is Admiral Charles Davis, representing Secretary of Navy Gideon Welles, General Edward Townsend, representing the Secretary of War, who is in charge of the funeral train all the way to Springfield. Behind it, on the second floor level, is a bust of Andrew Jackson and Daniel Webster. Jackson is here and Webster is there. And it's a level, as you walk up, it's a second floor level, and you walk down. So people, hundreds, walked up and walked down and looked in the face.
Could look down and down on the casket. This is the last picture of Abraham Lincoln.
This is it. Stanton ordered the plate destroyed, but he didn't have the heart to destroy the print. It went into his papers. Lewis found it, sent it to Nicolay, and Nicolay refused to use it in his collected works of 10 volumes, and so it went into his files. And then when John Hay's daughter gave that whole collection to Illinois in 1940, it was in that file.
There it was for a 14-year-old to find.
That's right.
Thank you, sir.
12 years later, it showed up.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Glenna, some of the items in your book are actually in a display case on the main floor.
Right.
You don't have to go back to the stacks, but you can actually come in here and see some of the items that are in the book.
Right.
And you're particularly proud of these items, these photographs of John Hay, who, for those who don't know, I think was Lincoln's personal secretary, was he not?
He was one of Lincoln's secretaries in the White House, and he and John Nicolay, the other secretary, together wrote a biography of Lincoln. But John Hay did more than that, because he became a very accomplished diplomat and ultimately was Secretary of State under William McKinley and under Teddy Roosevelt. And so he was involved with things like the Panama Canal and the China open door policy and stuff like that that you never think of. But the cool thing is that we have an ambrotype. The little photo is an ambrotype. It looks like a daguerreotype, but what it is it's a negative photo on a glass plate, and when it has black backing, it shows up as positive. And so it was taken when he was about 16. And then the larger photo is 50 years later.
When he's Secretary of State.
When he's Secretary of State.
Very interesting.
And the thing, as I was doing some research on this photo, I realized he signed it to Colesat, who was a major figure with the newspapers in Chicago. they probably knew each other, certainly through McKinley's campaign, if not otherwise. But he signed it to him about a week before Hay signed it about a week before he died.
He says, with the cordial regards of John Hay.
Right.
And then as we move down the way here, now then, these boots look older than 1971. They got a good workout, didn't they?
They did. They did, because Dan Walker walked 1,197 miles in them, and he probably broke them in before that, when he walked from south to the north in Illinois.
That was quite a ploy, and it worked. It helped to get him elected, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
And then there's these little tiny books, these miniature books. A fella named Ward Shorey, who worked up in Evanston.
Right.
This was either a hobby or a business of his. I'm not sure what.
Probably both. He was a specialty printer, for sure. And he printed more than 80, or at least I think we've got about 80 of these little books, and I think we've got a complete collection. None of them is bigger than 3 inches square. This is an example of one called Pigs as Pigs, and which is a really funny story, actually, about are guinea pigs really pigs? And, you know, how much is it going to cost to ship them, depending on which they are? It's a story from 1906, and there's an original version of it, larger one there.
Gwen Padegi, this must have been a fun project to work on.
This has been a tremendous project. It's one of those projects, though, that the minute you finish it, you find 5 more treasures. So it's been a wonderful project.
Well, it is. And, you know, Glenna couldn't do this by herself. I mean, it took a staff of people that knew all the collection, like yourself in the reference library.
Right.
You know, to know where to look for things.
Right. And whenever I teach somebody, when I have had a number of interns through the years, and whenever I teach them, I said, really the best way to learn, the only way to learn this, is by just digging in, jumping in, and finding
and
things.
Asking questions. Say, what is this?
Right,
Okay.
and just keeping pursuing
One
it.
of the things you tried to do for the book was to put together a map, a historical map of Illinois, and in order to do that, or actually you found a historical map of Illinois, and the lady that would put this map together back in the early 1900s, it wasn't that easy to get information. It was not the electronic age. She had to send out to all the counties, did she not, to get information back,
That's exactly
so she could do a state
That's
map.
exactly right. She was working under a deadline, I'm certain, and under a gun, and with financial constraints. Well, what's different about that from today? And she knew that she needed to go to Jamestown, Virginia, and build an exhibit of maps or of Illinois, representing Illinois for the Jamestown Tercentennial. That would be the 300th anniversary of the founding of Jamestown, Virginia. And so, of course, since Illinois was once part of Virginia, and many of us may not know that or may have forgotten it, she decided that one of the things that she wanted to concentrate on was a map. And lo and behold, she couldn't find a historical map of Illinois that met her purposes. There was one by Rufus Blanchard, had been published in 1883. It had the basics, but Jessie wanted more than that. Jessie Palmer Weber was the second librarian of the library, and she was also the daughter of a governor. So she was a she was a force to be reckoned with. She's a fun woman. She wrote well. She left lots of records. And she left records about making this map and taking Rufus Blanchard's map and adding to it, and how she did that.
Thank goodness she did.
I'm so glad.
What you did was you found a lot of the information she sent out to the various counties, like we described, to get information back so she could put this together. And you got us out this Monroe County map, because this was one of the projects she was working on to put her map together.
Right. And the nice thing about the Monroe map, and we have 36 of the 102 counties that responded, and we keep everything, so we kept all these. This is the map that Jessie drew and sent, and it was added to by the gentleman in Monroe County. I believe his name was Reverend C.J. Eschman, and he was in Prairie du Rocher, and he sent back notes and information. One of the nice things about this part of it is we still have her original letter attached in the record with the map, so we can see a nice bold signature here.
She wants an updated map.
She wants to know. She explains the project. It's primary resource heaven here, and then his response back to her and what he finds in Monroe County that perhaps wasn't on Blanchard or needed to be better explained.
Go to the people that are on the ground where you need the information.
Exactly,
And we
that
turn
was
away here,
wonderful.
we see the same thing in Peoria, right? She sent out to Peoria for the same kind of information.
And this is the map from Peoria. Now, unfortunately with Peoria, we don't get those wonderful correspondence letters with it. However, Peoria felt compelled to include some additional maps, as well as Jesse's original with their notes on, and if you can look at it, it's very heavily notated.
Yeah, it sure does. It's got her handwriting on it.
But they wanted to add even more about Peoria, and so they go around Peoria County, and then they come over here, and you see steam sawmills and flouring mills and grist mills, and then a city of Peoria. This is probably a page from a plat atlas, a land ownership plat atlas. So this map they must have chopped it out of the book, put some more notes on, and sent it all. And when it got back here, part of the cataloging that was done including all these 4 maps. Now when I found this set, I thought, well, these aren't the same map. Why does it say copy 2, copy 3, copy 4? But the reason is this is what was sent, and as it stands, it's one archive. And so it is one archive. It lives together in our maps.
Okay, and finally, Jessie gets a finished product, or what she considers at the time to be the best finished product of the map of Illinois as she can put together. She's taken all this information from all these counties, and she succeeds by putting together the map from, I think that you say is 1900.
It's around 1907 or so, because that's, again, it was when it went to Jamestown. The beauty of a map like this, it's not a primary resource. It's not a map that was drawn when these things happen that are depicted on it, but it is a map that tells about that, and so it's a historical record of itself. It's a tool, if you will, for libraries and for students who are looking for things. I mentioned the Governor Edwards trace. Goes along here, you see Governor Edwards, 1812. Well, what happened in 1812? Guess what? This is when the War of 1812 was going on, and Illinois had a little part of that, and this is where he took the troops. There are still remnants of what they call the Edwards trace. People talk about it. They have historical reenactions on it, or they go out and try to find other parts of it and find how it went and how it went through a community. You can go back to something like this, and this is the best guess. This gives people a clue, and it also puts it in perspective of what else was going on. Where do you see the mail routes in Illinois? Where did you see Pigot's Fort? Then we're going to go back down here to Monroe County. You're going to see these different forts and blockhouses and other things of Illinois. These are probably long gone. By the time this map was produced, these things have been long gone, but it's a way for students to keep the memory of the state's history alive.
And you may have heard the story about Paul Powell when he was Secretary of State of Illinois and the $800,000 that was found in his room at the St. Nicholas Hotel. Well, here is his suite key. And a picture of this is also in the book. Reminder, the book is The Treasures of the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. And this with hardback or paperback. They're both available in the museum bookstore. With another Illinois story in Springfield, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send $19.95 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.